John chapter 19. Not 19, I'm sorry. John 20. Nobody caught that, did they?
I did.
Did you really?
I started to say something, but then you caught it real quick.
The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, to the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter, and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Peter therefore went forth, and that other disciple that came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he, stooping down and looking in, saw the linen cloths lying, yet went he not in. Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen cloths lie, and the napkin that was about his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went in also the other disciple, which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. For as yet they knew not the Scriptures, that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away again unto their own house. And a lot of people would have thought, well, this is the end of the story. No. It is by no means the end of the story. As a matter of fact, in a lot of ways, it's the beginning of the story. The very beginning of the story. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 9. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe unto him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And we're in reference to the two that went to the tomb. And, it could have been just one that went to the tomb after Mary Magdalene went there and told them. But one would not suffice, would it? Even under the law, every word had to be heard in the presence of one or two witnesses, or two or three witnesses. So the fact that Peter and John ran to the tomb and both saw exactly what Mary Magdalene, there's three right there. Mary Magdalene, Peter, and John can all bear witness to the record that the stone was rolled away. It was very obvious. It wasn't there. It was rolled to the side. And still the speculation was as to who rolled it away. God did. God did. God rolled the stone away. But they were supposing that a lot of Jews or a lot of somebody, a whole group of people came and moved the stone out of the way because it was way too heavy for anybody to move by themselves. I don't know how many it took to put it in place. Probably several. But big, strong Roman soldiers to put it in place. But that was not the fact. It was not the fact. A group of people did not come and move the stone. So we have here these three. And, in Ecclesiastes it says that two is better than one. And we know that to be true. Two is better than one when it comes to doing anything. Because one can help the other. And you think about that. Anyway, they came to the tomb and they saw that it was empty, but they saw the grave clothes there. Now, you think about this. If someone had come and moved the body, would they have removed the grave clothes? Or would they have just taken the body as it was? I think, unless it was thieves or something, I think if they moved a body, they would have moved the body with the grave clothes on. Because the body was wrapped, sort of like a bandage. The idea of wrapping the body was almost like a bandage. You know, of course, putting the spices in every so often to help keep the body from stinking so much as it decomposed. But I would suspect that somebody would take everything. They wouldn't necessarily undo all of it. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to undo all of that and take everything off and then leave it there and then take the body away. But you never know about the thinking of some people. But I would suspect that would have been a clue. And you know, hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? It is. Looking ahead is kind of blurry and you can't always see exactly what you need to see. But hindsight is always 20/20. And looking back on it, you would think, well, the disciples should have known when the grave clothes were there that nobody had taken the body away. Why would they leave the grave clothes? I don't know if anything like that had happened before. I'm sure that graves had been robbed, sepulchres had been robbed. Now you understand, this is not a hole in the ground. This is a hewn out place in a rock. Okay? This is where they laid him, in a new tomb where no one had ever been buried before. They reused these things. If you go down to New Orleans, you'll see all of these graves that are above ground. And the reason being is because of the being below sea level. And the water pushing the stuff up out of the ground. And so they bury people above ground. So you see these monuments where they may have places for 3 or 4 caskets to slide in above ground. That's the way they do it. That's the way they do it. You don't ever stop and think about that, do you? But you always consider, you know, well, you always bury someone in the ground. Not always. I mean, the Indians used to put them up on the, I don't know what they called them, the things that raised them up above the ground to keep the animals from getting to them and everything else in their burial grounds. So there have been different things that different people have done. But suffice it to say, as the custom was of the day, to wrap the body, why would someone go to the trouble of unwrapping the body and taking the body and leaving everything there? The reason why the grave clothes were left there is because he wasn't there. Nobody took him. He took the grave clothes off. He took the napkin off, folded and laid it, and like I said this morning, the custom, even in the Old Testament, when the master of the house was not finished, he would fold the napkin neatly and leave it on the table. And that was a message to the servants not to touch anything because the master was coming back. If he had wadded it up and thrown it on the table, then he was done, he was finished, and they could come and take everything away. And that is just the thing. Jesus is coming back, as we said this morning. In Job chapter 17, in Job chapter 17 and verse 14, I have said to corruption, thou art my father, to the worm, thou art my mother and my sister. And where is now my hope? As for my hope, who shall see it? They shall go down to the bars of the pit when our rest together is in the dust. The title here that is given to chapter 17 is Where is My Hope? If you go back to the beginning of chapter 17 there, he says, my breath is corrupt, my days are extinct, the graves are ready for me. Are there not mockers with me? And doth not mine eye continue in their provocation? Lay down now, put me in a surety with thee. Who is he that will strike hands with me? For thou hast hid their heart from understanding, therefore shalt thou not exalt them. He that speaketh flattery to his friends, even the eyes of his children shall fail. He hath made me also a byword of the people, and aforetime I was as a tabret. Mine eye also is dim by reason of sorrow, and all my members are as a shadow. Upright men shall be astonished at this, and the innocent shall stir up himself against the hypocrite. The righteous also shall hold on his way, and he that hath clean hands shall be stronger and stronger. But as for you all, do you return and come now, for I cannot find one wise man among you. My days are past, my purposes are broken off, even the thoughts of my heart. They change the night into day, and the light is short because of darkness. If I wait, the grave is mine house. I have made my bed in the darkness. I have said to corruption, thou art my father, to the worm, thou art my mother and my sister. And where is now my hope? For as my hope, who shall see it? They shall go down to the bars of the pit. Even our rest together is in the dust. You know, Job knew exactly who he was, and he knew what his demise was, and he knew what was going to happen. He was ready. He was ready. Whatever God wanted. Whatever God desired. If it was God's will that he go to his death and be buried, he was ready. He was ready. You know, there's something to be said for people who are ready. There's a lot of people who leave this world unprepared. Even saved people who are not quite prepared. What do you mean not quite prepared? They have unconfessed sin in their life. And you know what? If you die with unconfessed sin in your life, you will stand accountable for it. You will give an account for it. Everything that we have confessed, everything that we have asked forgiveness for, will be forgiven and will be remembered no more and will not be held against us in judgment at the judgment seat of Christ. But the unconfessed sin, the stuff that we have not confessed, you say, well, why do we have to confess it? Why did Job have to confess anything? He was an upright man. He was a righteous man. Why did he have to confess? But Job knew exactly where he was. He said, I have said to corruption, thou art my father, to the worm, thou art my mother and my sister. He was now ready to go to the grave. And that's what would be there, would be the worm. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes. God made man from the dust of the ground, and to the dust he will return. But one day, all of that dust will come together once again, and will be caught up with those which are alive to meet him in the air, and will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. These physical bodies, these things that God created, will not stay in the grave, folks. As a matter of fact, at the great white throne judgment, death, hell, and everything else will give up its dead. All of those bodies will come out of the graveyard or the cemetery or whatever you want to call it. And they will stand before the great white throne judgment and receive their judgment for the deeds that they have done, and will be cast into the lake of fire. And a lot of people don't stop and think about that, but it will happen. It will happen. Why Paul said, blessed are you that have part in the first resurrection. Because the second resurrection is right before the great white throne judgment. And that's what it is, it's resurrection. Bringing back, but only to stand in judgment. There's still a lot of people that don't completely understand. In 2 Samuel chapter 1, Samuel chapter 1 verse 23. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles and stronger than lions. Why would David say something like that? Because David had respect. And David knew that Saul at one time was God's chosen one. He was the people's choice, but God blessed him, and Saul had every opportunity to do the right thing. But from the very beginning, he chose to do things his way. God said, go down and destroy all those people. Destroy them. All of the rich and the poor and everybody. Destroy them all and their animals and everything. And Saul took it upon himself to take the very useful, what he thought was useful, and the best of the animals and bring them back. When Samuel encountered Saul, he said, what is that bleating of sheep that I hear in my ear? What is this that you have done? Did God not command you to go and destroy all of these people, all of the people? What happened after that? Samuel took them down to the river and he killed them all. Because that's what God said to do. You say, God actually said that? Yes. Why would God say that about some other people? Because they worshipped other gods? Because he did not want them influencing his people? A lot of different reasons. But suffice it to say, God is the creator. He is the beginning of life and he is the end of life. He is Alpha and Omega. And that's the first and last letter of the Greek alphabet. He is the beginning and the end. If he says go and destroy these people, then Saul should have gone and destroyed the people and the animals and everything else. But he brought the best, what he thought was the best, back. A lot of times God has said to do things and man has taken it upon himself to do what he thinks is best. No, we're better off doing what God says is best. And it may not be easy and it may hurt. But doing what God says is always the best thing to do. Even when we don't want to. Saul and Jonathan, of all of these people. And you know, again, one of the most amazing things about the death of Jesus on the cross is that him hanging there in pain, in agony, and bleeding, cried out to the Father and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That he was actually that merciful. If he had been human, he probably would have called on the Father to destroy everybody, wouldn't he? How dare they do this to me? But Jesus was not that way. Jesus was the good shepherd. He was the lamb, the sacrificial lamb from the foundation of the world. He was the only thing that could bring the remission of sins and accomplish God's purpose. Nothing else could. Nothing else could. You see, one thing about Job is he didn't know exactly what God's purpose was. He was just going by what he could see and what he felt. But he knew God was true. And that's one thing that Job never did. He never charged God foolishly. He never blamed God for his lot in life. He had a lot. It was all taken away. But he did not blame God for that. And in the end, God had a great and wonderful plan, did he not? He restored unto him more than he had before. Let me tell you, Job suffered a lot. It wasn't just the sores. He lost his sons and his daughters. All in one day. All in one day. Lost all of his animals. He lost everything except for his wife. And most people, like his friend said, just curse God and die. Just give up. No. Job wouldn't do it. He told everybody that came to try to comfort him, he told them exactly who God was and who he was. And they were all convinced that he had committed some great sin that had caused this to happen. He never blamed God one time. Jesus never blamed anybody. He did not blame one man for his circumstances as he was hanging on that cross. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even as mean and as cruel as they were to him. That's amazing to me. That is amazing grace. It is. Is there something that you need to do this evening as we sing one verse of an invitation hymn?